And here in the studio with us today is a man who's been featured in the New York Times for his photography experiments. He's nominated for Best Instagram Account in the SF Weekly. He's scheduled to speak at the downtown SF Apple Store tonight. And we knew him before he was cool. The talented Dr. Popular.
Hey, how's it going, Nathan?
Good, man. So you are you're going to show us some tips and tricks with your favorite camera app.
My new favorite camera app.
Okay.
Hipstaclip was one of those apps that before I was even really taking iPhone photography, you'd see this like tons of photos with this vintage effects, and it was the very thing I kind of didn't like about retro fake photography. But I've actually found some things that have made me love Hipstaclip. It's totally my favorite app now. Okay. What prompted the change? Give me one of these tips. Well, one of the big things is when you're first looking through Hipstaclip in your viewfinder, you've got this this simulated analog effect where they kind of move it around a little bit to kind of give you the idea of like you don't really know what you're shooting at. With like an old camera, you kind of had an idea, but you didn't have this precision frame.
Right. That's actually one of the things that made me stop using Hipstaclip regularly, is because I know that it's trying to be an old camera, but at the same time, I want to know what I'm taking a picture of.
It's hard to let go of that. And luckily, there's a mode in settings where you can go through and put it on to precision viewfinder.
Okay.
So it comes with standard or classic, and you just put it into precision, and finally you'll be able to see exactly what you're shooting at. Now, I will say, I've actually gone out a couple times with classic mode and decided to just let go and be free, and I was actually really stoked about some of the surprises I had.
Okay.
But for the most part, you don't want to have like the shot you lined up, like this bus going down or a skater, and you take the shot and you check it later and you see that everything's just totally off. So that's the big thing that helped me.
So this is in the settings in the app, or
it's in global settings.
Global settings. So you actually go into the settings app for your phone, and then go into Hipstaclip there.
And that's about the only thing that you'll need to do in the global settings. Something that normally would be in the global settings is your high definition shot, which is obviously very important. But they actually put pretty much everything else you need, including high definition, just in the app. In the lower right-hand corner, there's the ability to be able to change the face of the camera.
Right.
So you change to the front where you're looking at the lens, and just make sure that that it's set to the big dot. It doesn't even have writing on it saying what it is, but if it's the tiny dot, that's low res. Big dot means high res, longer processing.
And that's another thing, because the interface of Hipstaclip is so ornamental and so just about kind of looking as much like an old camera as possible, I think a lot of people don't even think to touch that part.
Yeah.
You know, you just think it's that part that's next to the lens. You think it's part of the actual face of the camera. So that's cool to know.
I touched it by accident. I remember that. Like I was trying to change the lens and I was like, oh. And I think at that point I was shooting in low res, which is heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I think it probably comes in high res, but I don't know.
Okay, and so then if you're somebody who also likes things like Instagram and stuff like that, and you enjoy the instantaneousness of it, because some people I know are not so into the processing time of Hipstaclip, I guess the tip for them would be that you could do it the opposite direction. You
could do it smaller. The whole purpose of having the adjustable thing is that you can make it easier to email the files or to quicker to process, but eventually there's going to be this point where you have a photo that you love, and you can't go back and make it higher res.
Right.
So I never recommend to anybody.
You can always shrink a photo down, but you can't blow it up.
Absolutely.
Okay, gotcha.
Now speaking of blowing up, the other thing that really made me fall in love with Hipstaclip is the double tap viewfinder mode. So usually viewfinder is about 1/8 of the screen, but if you double tap, you get this nice big screen.
That's great.
That's really handy.
I like that.
What's also really cool about that too is you can be more subtle. You can actually touch anywhere on the screen and take a shot. So like lately I've just been doing all these kind of sniping is what they call it, but you know, things where you just have the screen in full screen mode and you just tap it once and you kind of know you got a good shot. Yeah,
getting that like street photography where people don't know. They don't become self-conscious because they don't know that you have your camera on them.
Yeah.
That's also nice because I feel like people can feel restricted by that small viewfinder in Hipstaclip, especially when they're so used to cell phone cameras and digital cameras now that it's all about giant touchscreen viewfinder.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird to go back to that tiny, what am I exactly looking at? What am I taking a picture of kind of viewfinder? So that's neat to know.
Now, one of the things I also just recently discovered is when you double tap and you're in classic mode where the viewfinder moves around, it actually shows you precision mode. And since I usually shoot in this large mode, I think I might actually try to embrace this. I might try to shoot with the random small mode, but if I ever need a shot, like I need that shot to be lined up, if I double tap, I know that what I see on the screen is exactly what's going to happen in the shot.
Yeah, that's really cool because then that gives you the versatility of both without having to go into your settings. Kind of awesome.
Now, one of my favorite other things about Hipstamatic is being able to match settings from previous shots. What Hipstamatic really encourages you to do is shake your camera and try to change your lenses and everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But what's really cool is if you just tap and look at your previous shots, you'll be able to see this black and white combination I don't like or whatever. But what's really nice is when you're actually in a venue, like maybe you were outside and now you're going into like kind of a dark bar, you can go back and see some of the previous shots you took in bars and be like, oh, this combination really worked. So you just pick a photo that you like, hit the match settings, and it'll just match the settings for you.
Oh,
so
that's
totally,
nice.
Yeah, they don't have preset kits, but this is basically the best thing. It kind of lets you kind of create your own little filters and then kind of recycle them or let the good ones bubble up because you keep matching them.
The only downside I would see with that is if you keep your prints in like the print area that Hipstamatic provides for you without deleting them, that can stack up pretty quickly, I'd imagine.
It is. It's actually kind of one of the things I don't love about Hipstamatic is that I've got these multiple copies, and I always forget that I have maybe 500 or 1,000 shots in Hipstamatic.
And you're like looking for the settings from one, and you're like,
And I'm never going to use them again other than for settings.
Right.
I mean, maybe what I have left are probably my favorite like 20 shots I've ever shot with Hipstamatic, which is kind of cool, and it'll make it more easy for me to be able to find those combinations.
Gotcha.
Now, the one final tip is if there's things you find are popping up when you shake your camera that you don't like combinations of film or lens, you can actually go back into the forward-facing mode where you see the lenses, tap the lower left-hand corner where the film is, and you've got an edit button. If you click on that edit button, you can actually go through and turn off random on certain things. You can also reorganize stuff too. So I actually have my favorite 5 rolls of film up near the top, and then the ones that I never want to delete film, but I have it off. And so I can always come back if I change my mind later, but if I shake my phone or if something happens, I'm not going to randomly end up in some jelly film.
That's so cool, because the other weekend I was at like a concert event. I was at Outside Lands here, and I had to I was taking like 8 pictures of everything and shaking and taking another picture and shaking and taking another picture. And I was like, none of these are turning out. And by then, like, the people had moved, the artist was off stage. So it's cool to know that you can actually pare those options down and like organize them.
Absolutely.
Very cool, man. This stuff is great. And you know, for somebody like me who I think maybe had moved on from Hipstamatic thinking that there were just too many quirks to deal with, you have definitely given me a way to deal with the quirks. So awesome. Doc, thanks so much for being here. In addition to being famous on the lecture circuit these days, Doc is also the community manager for Sincerely. You can download their apps Postagram and Pop Booth on the iOS App Store. Let us know your Hipstamatic tips and tricks and send us some of your Hipstamatic photos on Twitter and Facebook. We'll feature them next week on the show. We'll see you then.